Welcome, everyone, to episode 93 of Underserved. With me in studio today is Susan Kelly, Director of Engineering, Brand Growth at FAIR. Let's get started.
Welcome to this week's edition of Underserved, the podcast for the rest of the tech industry, where we focus on stories of tech industry leaders, their insights, and their lessons learned. And now, your host, Andrew Jelina.
Susan, thank you so much for joining us on Underserved.
Hi, Andrew. Thanks for having me today.
So way back when, what got you interested in technology?
So I've always had kind of a engineering mind. When I was a kid, I used to tear things apart and try to put them back together again. I always sort of enjoyed that. When I originally went to university, I was interested in becoming a mechanical engineer. And one of our required courses was to take Introduction to Computer Science. So I was spending some time in the lab. And in doing that, I stumbled upon some people that I knew from the dorm that were in the lab that weren't computer scientists. And they're there writing papers. And I'm like, what? Papers? And they introduced me to the word processing on it. And I got really fascinated because I'm dyslexic. I can't spell at all. And I, read kind of slowly at my own pace. And so that sort of also triggered me more towards the tech side rather than like a liberal arts degree. But I got really interested in the fact that, wow, you can write papers on here. I don't have to worry about spelling anymore. There's a spell checker on this thing. So I started spending more and more time in the computer science lab. And that's sort of what ended up kind of pivoting me away from mechanical engineering and more towards computer science.
So when you start taking CS, what sort of courses are you taking? What sort of languages are you studying?
Back then, it was Pascal, Fortran. We studied a little bit of C. We did some database work. And since it's through the engineering department, I still had to take some of the core curriculum in the engineering degree program, which included basic electrical engineering, basic mechanical engineering, those kind of courses.
Those were rough. I remember when I was in college, I lived in the engineering dorms, even though I wasn't an engineer, and they would stress out like a 53 on an exam would be an A with the curve.
Yeah, it was tough. And our course load was heavier than that of the liberal arts students, too.
What was your favorite course you took while you were there?
Actually, I think some of my favorite classes were actually the liberal arts classes. I took an economics class that I really liked and still have an interest in economics today, and photography. So sort of sometimes question why I actually went into engineering when I actually have these other interests. But I do like solving problems, and as an engineer, you get to solve problems all the time.
I'll tell you exactly why you went into engineering, because several other underserved guests have said, you know what? There's no money and opportunity like that, and you can keep the hobbies.
Yeah.
Photography is awesome, but it's very hard to make a living at it.
You can't. Yeah. Unless you're really, really good, and it's a fun hobby to have. And I haven't really pursued it actively since college, but I did enjoy it. And it's allowed me to sort of explore a different side of myself and think a little differently.
All for taking those liberal arts courses.
Yeah.
So you had a summer job in the physics lab as well?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I worked in the physics lab, and that was a good opportunity to actually work with some really super smart people. It really, was my first time I was doing real programming for something that mattered, like not just a course. And through that, I made some connections. I worked for them for one summer, and then I made some connections where they introduced me to some local businesses, and I ended up actually working at a robotics company as an intern for another year. Actually, that kind of combined both my interests in sort of the mechanical side of things as well as the software side of things.
So after a very brief consulting stint, you end up working for Converse Network Systems?
Yes, I did.
And what were you doing there?
Well, actually, Boston Technology is the company I joined, and Boston Technology developed the first central office-based voicemail systems. So instead of the voicemail systems, or an answering machine or a voicemail system that might be at your office complex, this was ones that you would get from the telcos. So at the time, it was New England Telephone, Bell South, and then the mobile companies came in later. They sold to all the major carriers, not only domestically, but internationally as well. And then at some point, they combined forces with Converse Network Systems, and so we became Converse Network Systems.
You mentioned in the pre-call you had some great bosses there, one in particular.
Yeah, sure. Love to give a shout out to Bob Slazak. I consider him to be a mentor as well as somebody who really championed me in my early career. So definitely instrumental in me sort of moving into management, sort of accelerating my career in management and exposing me to sort of other aspects of the business.
So you traveled quite a bit for that job. I think you had a story around NTT Docomo.
Yeah, so we worked with NTT Docomo, and some deliveries did not go well. And at one point we had to basically fall on our sword in front of Docomo. And so flew to Japan for a meeting. We basically had to apologize to them and flew home.
You were working on your MBA while you were there as well?
Yeah, so it took me a long time to get my MBA. I was doing it at nights, and the challenge there was because I was traveling so much, I would start taking class and I'd have to drop it because I had been traveling and missed enough classes that I couldn't really continue. Took about 7 years, but I eventually got my MBA from Babson. One of the reasons why I pursued my MBA is I'd always known when I'd finished my undergraduate that I did want to go to graduate school, but I wasn't really sure for what. I had actually toyed with the idea of studying economics, but then I decided that, I think to your point earlier, the money to be made is in tech. I did enjoy it. I like solving problems, and I'd moved into management. I really thought getting an MBA would really help me understand the other sides of the business and make me more effective in my leadership role.
And do you carry any of that into your next role at Virtual Inc.?
Yeah, certainly I did. I understood kind of marketing and finance a lot better. So when the company was experiencing financial challenges, I really sort of, understood what was going on and, why a lot of the decisions that were being made. And they're largely financially driven. And really, that's what companies do. They're making decisions based on finances. It's really what it all comes down to.
What did Virtual Inc. do? What was their product?
Before people carried smartphones on them and before there were a lot of smart whiteboards out there. So they had a device that could affix to a standard whiteboard and sleeves that you could put a regular whiteboard marker into. And it used ultrasonic sensors on the whiteboard, and the sleeves were an ultrasonic emitter, and it would capture everything that was written on the whiteboard. What was really cool about it is it actually could replay it in the time that it happened. So if you're, say, as a professor, maybe, writing out an equation, you wouldn't just see the finished equation. You would see their full, drawing out of, the full math of it to the very end. It was actually really cool.
Did it record audio at all?
That's one thing that we're working on, but yeah.
Yeah, because I think that would be pretty cool, watching the stuff appear on the board.
Yeah.
Was it doing an XYZ, so it would
It was
know?
doing an XY translate, coordination location.
Cool. And so you hinted at that, they probably weren't terribly financially successful. What do you end up doing after that?
So after I left Virtual Inc., I had a kid. And I took a couple years off. And at that point, the internet was really sort of coming into its own. And I knew nothing about that technology. And I had a friend that had an internet business and was actually looking for software developers. And I said, listen, I don't know that, but give me a few weeks, I'll learn it and let me come work for you. So the business that he was in was developing websites for independent schools. The company was called Schoolyard. So I ended up working for him for a number of years, sort of really becoming a principal in that company. As the company grew and adding engineers, sort of became the de facto engineering manager. Eventually that company got sold to another company called Final Site and worked for them for about a year, left Final Site to work for another small business, completely different space, which was in kind of internet marketing and advertising.
You are listening to the Underserved podcast. Underserved is produced by Maris Consulting Group, embracing the power of people in technology. For more information, visit mariscg.com. That's mariscg.com.
So this software, what did it help the independent schools do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so we built our own content management system that was really targeted at supporting the independent schools. So creating a basic website is fairly straightforward, but then when you have to serve a number of constituents, and in the case of independent schools, it's the parents, the faculty, the administration, alumni, students, there become a lot of different dimensions to it. And at that time, there were a number of different companies that had very targeted products, like Blackboard was really more for teachers in the classroom. There were other programs for grades. We actually kind of glued them together, and then we had our own system for kind of building out websites, allowing the administrators to manage the content. And, one of the things that we offered that the schools actually loved was the sports schedules were incredibly difficult. But, we eventually kind of got it right. And the schools were very particular about how they wanted the sports schedules to read. So some schools wanted JV women's basketball versus women's JV basketball. And so there's all these different nuances that we had to account for. And, that's kind of where the challenge was, and making it easy for them to create the websites in the way that they wanted to handle things, and that didn't put too much burden on us on the administrative side of things.
So the customers are like prep schools in New England?
Yeah, typically prep schools. We're actually all around the world. We're a Rhode Island-based company, so it's largely in New England, but we had schools in Texas, California. We had some in with the American school system, so American schools of London, Oman, you name it, we did their websites.
And so you said you learned the technology in a couple of weeks. Must have been Cold Fusion.
It was Cold Fusion.
How was scaling that?
So Cold Fusion, actually, it wasn't great initially, but it's built on Java. And so we ended up kind of moving more towards the Java side of Cold Fusion and ultimately built kind of the server-side technology in Cold Fusion, but it was very Java-like. And then the front end was JavaScript-based.
So I think you hinted you moved on from there to EverConnect?
Keyword Connects.
Keyword Connects.
Yeah, so Keyword Connects, they built landing pages for home improvement systems. And then from that, the idea is you'd come to these landing pages and you'd book an appointment, and then they'd try to sell you whether it's like gutters or windows or bath fitting systems or basement water remediation systems. So those are the level of home improvements companies. So these are like national brands. What was unique about our company is that we had a call center, and the call center would then call you back, schedule an appointment. And one of the things that I learned in that is they want both decision makers. Typically a household, it's two people. They'd want to know if it's a one-legger or a two-legger was the expression in that industry. So a one-legger was a single decision maker. A two-legger was both decision makers would be there for the appointment.
It's always harder to pitch the two decision makers.
Right. Well, that's why they want them both there. So if one person's there, they can't say, well, I need to talk to my spouse about this.
And who are the customers?
Yeah. Busy Dog Basements, Gutter Helmet, Bath Fitters, Anderson Windows.
And did you guys get paid off of conversions, or how did that work?
We got paid for appointment set, and I think we got paid an additional sum if we actually landed a deal.
Okay. And so after your stint there, you end up moving to Verizon?
Yep. The company really, wasn't growing. I wasn't growing at the company either. And so kind of wanted to get back to like a bigger, sort of more established environment, and then found an opportunity at Verizon and was really excited to be part of a new team there, which is Verizon Labs. And Verizon Labs was established to really sort of build equipment. So Verizon, like most telcos, they go to various equipment vendors like Cisco, Alcatel, a variety of major vendors. And the problem with that is every carrier goes to them. And so it's really hard to differentiate. And so what Verizon wanted to do was kind of roll their own. They wanted to build their own equipment. So I went there to be part of a team that did that. And so we were building some stuff that could like have more insights into what's going on into the network. And the idea is that once we had those insights, then we could build some innovative products on top of that.
And what were some of the things you built on top of that?
So the product that we were first working on was to come up with some innovative billing plans with the idea that we could maybe have these like a plan that might be a social media plan. And you have to remember at this time, the markets had done away with the unlimited data plan. And so, you might get, whatever, 5 gigabytes or whatever with your plan a month, and everyone was like busting up against limits. So the idea of this was, well, what if we come up with a data plan that wasn't like an all-you-can-eat buffet, but maybe an all-you-can-eat buffet for certain categories of data, whether it's video, social media, news, whatever. And you might pay a slight premium on that, but then you can pick 3 social media channels and have an all-you-can-eat buffet with like Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, for example.
And would like Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn help underwrite the cost, or was it just kind of consumer pays?
It was sort of consumer. Yeah, it was like we would collect a little more revenue, and it was really just like another way to attract consumers to the Verizon brand. Then unlimited data came back, and I distinctly remember one day I was sitting on the couch with my daughter, and Verizon announced unlimited data, and I looked at her and going, well, that kills my product, and sure enough, like a month later, it was dead.
There goes the last 4 years.
Yeah, exactly. It was kind of demoralizing. So then, the team I was working on, we pivoted to some other stuff. One of the things that was really kind of fun to work on was mobile advertisement. So Verizon had built basically an HDMI dongle that also had like a wireless chip in it so that you could basically upload content to any TV or any, screen that had an HDMI input. So you can imagine like screens in a store or, on a bus or in a theme park or anything like that, so that you could, upload advertisements, you could control the cycle at which they're run, can change them, have, pretty dynamically. You can maybe even do like emergency alerts on them. That was really a fun project to work on.
They were ahead of their time, because I've had to hand hack a bunch of Raspberry Pis here in the office to do the same thing. But that's a cool idea. In 2016, though, life threw you a curveball.
It's funny, I actually talk about this pretty easily, but every now and then it hits me. On election day in 2016, my husband was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer.
I mean, just the bottom falls out of your life then.
Yeah, it really, really did. It was one of the worst days of my life.
Well, what do you do from there?
Yeah, what do? You're not prepared for this. So the first week, I sort of hid under the cover of sort of the general shock going around of, Trump being elected. A lot of people, were in the office really just trying to absorb that. I was able to kind of, like I said, hide under that cover of being a little shell shocked. But then, having met with the oncologist the following week, I was able to have something to tell my boss about sort of, what was going on and what kind of impact this would have on my life. And he was really great. He gave me the room to work from home and take afternoons off, sort of do what I needed to do to support my husband and his care. Unfortunately, my husband only lasted for another 5.5 weeks.
Oh, geez. I am so sorry to hear that. What do you do after he passes? Now you're the only parent, the only breadwinner. You can't walk away from work.
Yeah, right. So that's something that a lot of companies can really do a lot better. I think Sheryl Sandberg had also lost her spouse in and around that time period, as I recall, and, had written her book, Plan B. One of the things she talks about was like Facebook instituting a 20-day bereavement leave, which is huge. Like 4 days is typical, and it's not enough. It might be fine if it's not somebody that's in your close circle, but it's not enough if it's, a spouse, a child, immediate family member, or maybe a very close friend that you might be even a caregiver for. So I think, areas where companies can do better is to have more generous policies and maybe even more flexible policies, based on your relationship that you have with the person. And the other area that was difficult for me is, so my husband died right before Christmas, and, a lot of people are off then. So I was away. I didn't return back to work until like the second week of January. And a lot of people were like, hey, welcome back. And I'm like giving this death stare, like, F you.
Yeah. How was your Christmas?
How was your Christmas? It's like, it sucked, and I wasn't going to say that. I just sort of gave him like a really grumpy look. And, I sort of come to find out that like no one knew other than like my immediate team. And so that's like another thing companies can do, is to have like a communication plan in place. It might look something like, we need to tell people, here's the people that need to be told, and working with the impacted employee, like, how do you want us to let people know what's going on in your life? It might be the case that the person, even before they die, they're terminally ill, like somebody's a caregiver, like, hey, we need to let people know this is going on in your life so that they can have some empathy for you and understand that if you have to suddenly not be at a meeting, they know why, or you're not available during certain hours, they know why.
Syrinx has spent a lot of time and effort over the past 25 years building our reputation for quality and our brand. There was one big problem, though. No one could pronounce our name correctly.
Person on the street, brand testing, take one. Hi, can you pronounce the name of this company?
Syrinx?
That's a really good guess.
Really?
Now, how would you pronounce the name of this company?
Syrinx?
Not even close. Can you pronounce the name of this company?
Shrinks.
Luckily for us, Syrinx was acquired in 2022 by the DeWinter Group. We're rebranding Syrinx under DeWinter's highly regarded technology consulting arm, Maris Consulting Group. We bring Syrinx's deep technology delivery experience, and they bring broader delivery capabilities and a new identity as Maris.
Here's what you can count on from the unified Maris. We are now a nationwide powerhouse when it comes to technology consulting, from DevOps to developers to project managers to business systems.
So join me in welcoming our future as Maris. Hopefully people will have an easier time pronouncing this one.
How would you pronounce the name of this company?
Maris.
How would you pronounce the name of this company?
Maurice?
Is that your uncle's name? Can you pronounce the name of this company?
Mars.
That's a planet.
Maybe not.
So contact Maris today and we'll help you get your project done on time and on budget. You can call us at 408-297-7500 or you can find us on the web at mariscg.com. That's mariscg.com. There should be like some sort of selectable level of disclosure.
Yeah.
And like selectable audience.
Yeah.
To let people know that, hey, yeah, something might come up last minute, or I might just need time to like not focus on work. My dad passed in 98 and I was consulting at the time. My boss was great about giving me as much unpaid time off as I wanted. But, you know, you're always feeling like, will my job be there when I get back?
Right.
And you're worrying about that. And then you come back and you vacillate between just wanting to concentrate on work so you don't have to think about death and loss to I can't even concentrate on work because all I can think about is death and loss.
Yeah, and I think that that's the other thing too, is like grief really impacts your brain in ways that I don't even think we really fully understand, but concentration is certainly one of them. I really had trouble focusing for about a year.
And companies aren't set up to help you recover and give you the runway that you need to do that. Like you said, like 4 days of bereavement's pretty standard. 20 is a huge step forward. And I get it from a company's perspective. Like, well, we can't just give everyone unlimited time off or 90 days for bereavement because A, it costs a lot of money and B, yada, yada, yada. But realistically, like, yeah, it's going to take a long time and you're going to have a productivity hit. And you're probably going to have to look at it like almost like an investment in this person.
Right. And, you know, given that, you know, my boss did give me a lot of latitude, I sort of adjusted some of my working hours because I was sole parent. My daughter went to a charter school that was like 11 miles in the opposite direction from where like our house was and work. So it was like if I had to pick from school, it was an hour. There was a bus that brought her home. I had to pick her up from the bus. So I ended up working sort of weird hours to make sure that she got on the bus in the morning and that I was there to pick her up in the evening. So I'd tended to sort of home from the morning, miss the rush hour traffic, go in, stay till about 3 o'clock. Then I'd go home, pick her up from the bus, and then I'd work in the evening. And it kind of worked out because I actually worked a lot with India and in California. And so it gave me that opportunity to do those early morning meetings with India and then those later afternoon, evening meetings with California. So I was sort of getting in my time without really, you know, impacting people. But it was a huge benefit to me that I had confidence that I could be there for my daughter when she needed me.
There's another unexpected thing that happens when people have a close person die or divorce or something like that. Like it really just can sack your confidence.
It's kind of crazy, but yeah, I really felt like I was not capable of things. I just, you know, questioned my own capabilities.
And so what do you do to kind of work through that?
You know, really is kind of like that old saying, one day at a time, is just try to get through it and remind myself that, it was okay. Try not to overthink things. That was one thing that I actually got pretty good at. I used to be very sort of particular about like making sure my daughter did her homework and having nutritious meals on the table. And quite honestly, the fact that my daughter got through high school at this point was like, I was excited. For a while, I honestly thought she wasn't going to graduate from high school. You know, she'd gone from being like a very good student, you know, good attendance to, you know, her grades were really suffering because she was suffering. And, you know, I was called into the school probably once a week for some issue. And as, you know, again, because Verizon gave me the, you know, sort of the latitude to sort of not be in the office and deal with these personal things, that was great. But that was also impacting my work life and my confidence.
I think it's just very tough to like put one foot in front of the other and try to envision things getting better 30, 60, 90 days out. I remember in 2009, we're losing money every month. It looks like the company might go under because of the economy. And like, I started making myself calendar invites like 30, 60 days out and saying, is it any better now? Like it took like, I don't know, 270 days, but eventually it was like, okay, there's a glimmer of hope. Things are a little better. I don't feel like absolutely terrible.
Yeah. And I think that was it. It'd be like a few months out, there are days that I feel like I didn't feel for 2 hours. Like, yeah, this is progress.
That's a win.
I'll take that as a win. But, I learned a few lessons. One was like, don't overthink things and don't be too hard on yourself. So we're ordering takeout. My daughter wasn't necessarily doing the best job on her homework. Like, who cares? It's not the end of the world. And I used to like really sort of obsess over emails and like try to make sure the spelling was right and the grammar was perfect. I'm like, just get it out. Doesn't matter. Like, people figure it out.
But around this time and like when you get to like late 2018, Verizon's not doing so great. So what happens then?
Yeah. So Verizon offered 50,000 employees an opportunity to take a severance package. And it's sort of 2 years in, I was feeling like I kind of needed a change. Not that I hadn't had enough changes in my life already, but it's like, all right, I need to sort of close this chapter and start a new one. And so I decided to take the package, and it was a really great package for me. I ended up with 6 months pay, had all my RSUs, kept medical insurance for 6 months. So it was really a fantastic deal. So I left Verizon at the end of 2018. Coincidentally, I'd also put my house on the market in October. So the date I closed on my house was also my last day at Verizon. And I bought a condo in Boston without a job. So I, moved into Boston sort of with the anticipating that I'd find some work, in tech-related field in the Boston area.
And where do you find work in a tech-related field?
I found work at Wayfair. I was really excited to go there. It's kind of one of the companies that was high on my radar when I'd left Verizon. And actually, it's sort of a funny story. They contacted me fairly early in my search. So I decided, first off, I'm going to move, take some time off. I had this wonderful vacation in the Galapagos with my daughter. So that was really kind of amazing. But Wayfair had reached out to me, actually. And it was one of the first interviews I did. And I'm like, oh, damn, like I wanted to have a practice interview before I interviewed with Wayfair. I actually ended up not getting the job. They ended up hiring somebody who they referred to as a boomerang, somebody who had been Wayfair and came back. And they said, oh, do you mind if we keep your name on file for other jobs? There's always things coming up. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Never expected to hear from them again. While I'm in the Galapagos, I get an email from them saying, we'd love to have you back. And I had one day where I had email connection there. So I got the email. I'm like, great, love to set it up. I'm going to be back on this date. And so went back in for an interview and ended up working at Wayfair and their what they refer to as storefront for those, their consumer-facing website. I had a pretty good run there for 3 years and really enjoyed it.
You were tackling a lot of performance problems?
Yeah, so people performance as well as site performance. When I got there, the org that is handed really wasn't rational in any sense. Like one team had like 15 people in it and like it was unclear what their roles and responsibilities were. And other teams, had like 4 people and, had like huge like surface area of stuff that they needed to cover. And so, spent some time understanding, sort of the mission of each team, what was on their roadmap, and then sort of made some rationalizations, shuffled some people around. There were people that were put in management roles that probably shouldn't have been management roles and, either found them new roles within the company or they returned to being ICs, within the organization that I was managing. One of the teams that I did take on was the site performance team, and it was a really small team and remained small for, some pretty good reasons. You don't want a team taking on the role of managing site performance for the whole site. That's too much. What you really want to do is you want to create a structure and then share out that knowledge and have other teams work in that structure so that they can manage the performance of whatever software they're building.
You had a lot of management changes while you were there. You had a story about the review cycle towards the end of your tenure?
Yeah, so we had a lot of management come in. The company, for whatever reason, hired a lot of people from Walmart. We actually refer to it as the Waymartization of Wayfair. Originally, when I'd gone to Wayfair, I don't want to say enjoyed the review process. I don't know that any manager really enjoys it, but I thought it was a really fair process in that they didn't have a curve. People got the ratings that they deserved. We definitely did pressure test the ratings through calibration process. And I felt in general that, people got the ratings that they deserved. During the last review cycle that I was there, we were sort of given a curve and we were basically forced to fit people in the curve. Now, this is a time that we hadn't been doing a lot of hiring. And so we had some people that had been in roles for a while and had really developed in those roles and had, sort of met, more than met the expectations of the roles, were deserving of promotions. And so we're like being kind of forced to force down ratings. And the situation that happened in my group is I had actually taken on a much smaller team, narrowed it down to like 15 people, somewhat cherry-picked to focus on site-wide promotions for Wayfair. And the idea is that we would take this group, small team, and then we'd grow it into something much bigger. We were also doing video commerce at the time, so I had a small team focused on video commerce. So anyway, I had 15 people, 3 of which were up for promotion. And they all got the promotions, all, went through the promotion panels. I had people coming up to me afterwards, one person in particular saying, I thought they were already at that level. This is one of the best promotion packets I've seen in a while. Like one person, all clearly sailed through the promotion cycle. I get a Slack message from my boss saying, you're ruining the curve. You can't promote 3 people. You only have a group of 15. And I, advocated. They all got their promotions, and it just seemed ridiculous. You can't apply the averages of large numbers to a small group. Like, I don't know when these sort of curves become applicable, but it's not at 15. It's probably on the order of about 100 or so at least. And so that really frustrated me. I spent a lot of political capital ensuring that these people got their promotions and sort of realized my days were numbered and started looking for a job right away.
Now, you were there during the pandemic, sitting at home and ordering furniture boom. What was that like?
That was pretty crazy. So one of the things I really applaud Wayfair is that they are very transparent in their numbers. And so we can see, everyone had access to how the sales volumes and things like that. Wayfair has various, what they call sales holidays, clearly, what's referred to as Cyber 5. So the time period between Thanksgiving and Cyber Monday, that's referred to as Cyber 5. That's a huge event for, any e-commerce company. But Wayfair also had these days called Way Days, do these major sale events twice a year. Our traffic after the pandemic every day exceeded our biggest days in, either Cyber 5 or Way Day. It was crazy.
Every day is a Cyber 5 day.
Every day is a Cyber 5 day. And our site was holding up. We weren't falling over. Performance, in terms of site performance, it was holding up. It was great.
You're using Akamai and all sorts of edge technologies?
Yeah. So we're using Fastly and Akamai were our 2 major vendors there.
So after pandemic dies down and things are starting to get back to normal, you mentioned that, you'd burned a lot of political capital taking care of your people.
Yeah.
What do you do after that?
Get a new job. I was sort of, the new management, the new philosophy, it just didn't align with me. I hadn't been happy there for a while, and that was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. So I started looking for a new role and somehow got contacted about this company called Fair, and never heard of them before. They're a company, they're founded in San Francisco, but their engineering is largely run out of Waterloo, Ontario. The company runs a B2B marketplace, and their focus is on the small business. Sort of the tagline for the company is "The future is local." So they're really trying to support those smaller local businesses. So if you're a small business that, makes something, a maker, we refer to them as brands. So say you make hats or straw baskets or candles or maybe even apparel, and you want to sell wholesale. Your options are you can go to these various vendor trade shows. You could sell on Amazon, but then you sort of get lost in Amazon. Potentially Amazon could take advantage of you. A lot of stories are coming out about that. Or you could come to Fair and sell your goods wholesale on Fair, where we also have a number of small retailers. Come to look for wholesale products that might be, unique or at least, more interesting than the stuff that you might find on Amazon or other just wholesale Alibaba type websites.
Now, when you're not hands-on keyboard, what are you off doing for fun?
For many years, I played squash competitively, but having moved to Rhode Island in the pandemic, I don't really have great access to that. So I've kind of doubled down on my interest in sailing. So actually, I learned to sail with my husband. We were a sailing team. And then after he died, I partnered up with another friend of mine who's coincidentally, her husband also passed away. So the 2 of us became sailing partners, and we sail a boat called a Beetle Cat, race those every Sunday. More recently, I've joined a sailing club in Stonington, Connecticut, and have taken up sailing there. So I race with them on Saturdays and do some recreational sailing with them as well.
Now, how big are the boats? What sort of sails are you flying?
These are tiny sails. So the Beetle Cat is a single sailboat. It's a 12-foot long sailboat. It's a classical wooden New England sailboat.
Uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable is the word. Yeah. You have to duck on that boom too. And then in Stonington, we sail a boat called an Ideal 18. It's a keel boat. It has a main and a jib. And it's sort of, refer to as real sailing. And it's super comfortable. It's got a nice bench to sit on. And it also has a spinnaker too. So you can, it's a real sailboat. You can practice all sail management management with it, and it's super fun to sail.
Tacking, jibing, going on a run.
Going on, run downwind with a spinnaker. And
that's cool. Do you ever want to scale this up and like take a big sailing vacation somewhere?
Yeah. So one of the things I did before I left Boston was I joined a sailing club in Boston, again, to learn how to sail sort of some bigger boats and got some cruising qualifications. And sort of, I think my vision is, in retirement is to get a bigger boat and kind of, knock around the Caribbean for a while.
Have you heard of Jost Van Dyke?
Yes, I have. I've been to Jost Van Dyke.
Did you go to the Soggy Dollar and get a painkiller?
Yes, I did.
Very nice. For folks that don't know, it's this beautiful little bay on an island in the British Virgin Islands. And a lot of people bring their sailboats up there, drop anchor, and then you have to swim in so your money gets wet. And they have these little tiny huts on the beach that basically have enough electricity to power a blender, and that's about it. And you can get your specialized drinks there.
One of the last things I did before the pandemic was I went on this qualification trip for the ASA cruising certificate. We did the BVIs for 7 days, and I was in Jost Van Dyke.
That sounds pretty awesome.
And then the world shut down.
Well, you snuck it in.
I did.
Susan, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your experiences with the listeners of Underserved.
Thanks so much for having me. This was fun.
And we'll talk to everyone soon on the next episode of Underserved.
Thank you for listening to the Underserved podcast. For more information on the topics discussed and for show notes, visit the show website, underserved.fm. And please be sure to rate, like, and subscribe to Underserved on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.